Let's jump in. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Café. This is where we study Kabbalah and also talk about, time. Time and time changes, and we enjoy each other's company as we study. David, good to see you. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, in Alabama also, Shabbat has to come in early. It's got to, right?
It does.
Because it's like an hour back or something, right? Something, it's like on the cusp, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Maxey, good to see you. Frank,
Hi.
welcome. All right, good. So let's jump in. Norm, welcome. Good to see you. I got the hot seat for you. You have two options. No rush. I'm just saying, we got the option set up. So today, I love today's topic. Today's topic is break in case of emergency. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Break in case of emergency.
No.
I see some nods. What is break in case of, where does it say that? Well, it actually says, in case of emergency, break glass. What is that?
Fire alarm.
That's right, the fire alarm. Excellent, yes, correct. Today, we're gonna speak about what that means within the soul. And I first want to introduce a topic, or a concept that is brought in Kabbalah and Chassidut, which is Ahava mesuteres. I wrote about it in the email last night. I'm still adjusting to the time. We'll get back to Friday emails, don't worry, at some point. Ahava mesuteres literally translates as hidden love, but as we'll see today, that doesn't really fully capture what this dimension of the soul is. So Kabbalah really gives us an insight into what lies under the hood of the human condition, right? Because as human beings, we kind of think like, I don't know, this is who I am, and that's it. And we know like psychology goes inside, the psyche of a person, what's at the core of how a person thinks, what drives or motivates a person, different psychological theories of what drives a person, what are the motivators. But Kabbalah has its own understanding of what lies inside the heart, what lies inside the soul of the human being. Kabbalah, in fact, says that we have not just one soul, but of course, as you know, we have two souls, the godly soul and animal soul. But at the core of the godly soul, there lies 10 soul powers, kochot hanefesh. Within that, at the core of that, lies what Kabbalah refers to as Ahava mesuteres, which is hidden love. What does hidden love mean? It's a love that is so deep and so powerful that it can't be tampered with or altered. I'll explain. So there's a verse I believe it's in Mishlei, it's in Proverbs, it says, Ner Hashem nishmat Adam. The candle of God is the soul of man or mankind, humankind. So that means that the soul, our neshama, right? Ner Hashem nishmat Adam. The neshama, our neshama, our soul, is likened to a candle or a flame. What's the composition of a flame? Or a candle. So, a candle is comprised, or a lamp is comprised of various items. You need a vessel, you need oil, you need wick, and you need a flame. But we'll focus today specifically on the flame. The flame by nature, a fire by nature, constantly rises or strives upward. Right? This is like one of the Hanukkah messages that typically come out, it'll come out in about, I don't know, November 3rd, month and a half, actually almost 2 months, whatever, when Hanukkah rolls around December 26th this year. So a flame, a fire, always trends upward. You take a candle and you tilt it sideways, the flame is still going to point up. It's a very odd thing. And it's the opposite of water. Water always goes down. Water never said, I'm fine over here. I'm fine up. Right? You make a hole in the bottom of the cup. The water never said in its entire history, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm going to stay where I am. Water always seeks the lowest. Fire always seeks, by contrast, the highest. Fire always strives upward. Water always strives downward. That's the difference between fire and water. That's why they're opposites, right? We say fire and water. They're extinguishing each other. Water extinguishes fire. Fire evaporates water. Right? They're almost nemesis. It's almost like Superman and who's the arch enemy of Superman here? Help me out here.
Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor, thank you very much. I knew there was one. Lex Luthor, thank you. Good. Right? It's fire and water. They're like arch enemies, right? It's like they're opposites. And where do we see this? We see this in the direction that they flow. Water flows down, fire flows up. Water is therefore likened, or is therefore an analogy to the baser instincts of the human condition, of the animal soul, which always trend downward, always seeking more and lower and more pleasure, etc. Whereas the godly soul is likened to a fire, always seeking higher experiences, sublime experiences, to connect with its source. A fire by nature wants to go back to its source. It's not logical, because its source, at least the way Kabbalah explains this, the source of fire is the supernal root of fire, or Yesod Ha'esh, the foundational element of fire. Were the flame of the individual candle to get its wish, it would disappear from this reality and become subsumed within that spiritual source of fire. And yet it wants that even to its own detriment. I'll say that a little bit more clearly, perhaps. Most things want to express their own individuality and identity as a yesh, as a thing. Fire, by contrast, wants more than anything else to be undone, to undo itself, to release itself from its earthly, terrestrial tether, to leave the wick and to go back to its source. And if it would go back to its source, guess what wouldn't be around? It, as a unique, identifiable, individual flame. What would it be? Part of the source. But you wouldn't have flame, you would have source. But it doesn't want flame, it wants source. So deeply, it's not ready to. All it wants is to surrender its own mitziyut, to surrender its own selfhood. That's what it wants. Does that make sense? This is a powerful analogy for the soul. The soul by nature wants to be subsumed within the source. It wants to go back. In fact, our sages say, against the will of the soul, we live. Because the desire of the soul at its core is to connect back with its source. This is a powerful innate desire. It's a desire that it stems from its origins, its spiritual DNA. It is a piece of God, and that's what it wants to be, and that's what it wants to return to, as literally going back to, you take out a piece, it wants to go back to where it came from. That's what the soul wants. The sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, the Torah tells us they brought a foreign fire, and their lives were taken. Kabbalah explains, what's this foreign fire that they weren't authorized to bring? It means that they themselves were on fire, spiritually on fire. And the flame of their soul was so excited on the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan that their souls literally leapt out of their body. We call that klot nefesh, where the soul just is, the ecstasy of the soul is too powerful for the body to contain it. It's like, imagine if the flame on the candle got really active and really supercharged to the point that the wick can no longer hold on to. I mean, we've all seen that happen, right? When the oil runs, an oil lamp, right? When the fuel runs out, what happens? Flame is gone. Where does it go? It goes back. Once you're not holding on to it anymore, it goes back to its source. So what's the point of all this? The point is that we each have this powerful fire inside of us, and it's the core of our soul. The core of our soul. Every single one of us has this fire inside. However, we're not always aware of it. Despite the fact that we have it, despite the fact that it's at the core of our being, we're not always aware that we have this fire burning, nor do we always live by it. If we lived by it 24/7, you know what it would look like? It would look like someone who is spiritually on fire. Prayer, mitzvahs, Torah study, good deeds, a man's just totally on fire. Not distracted, not complaining, not lethargic, not all, but someone who's on fire. And we've all had moments in which we're in that space, but it's hard to be there 24/7, even though it's at the core of our being. So this is what the mystics refer to when they use the expression Ahava mesuteres. Ahava mesuteres means it's a love, a powerful love. Powerful doesn't do it justice. It's a love that is almost uncontainable. It's a powerful and passionate love that's inside of us, but it's mesuteres in the sense, it's hidden in the sense that we're not always aware of the fact that we even have this fire inside, this love, this passion inside. It's in the core, it's at the core of our being, but we're not always aware of it. Now, that could seem like a problem, but the truth is, as much as it's a problem, it's also a good thing. And I'll tell you why. Kabbalah gives, and this is a topic that we've, or an analogy that we've explored before in other contexts, but I think it's important to repeat over here. Kabbalah gives cites two different forms of fire. There's the fire, the eish, shebegachelet, the fire within a coal, like a hot coal. And then you have the eish shebetzur hachalamish, that is in the flintstone. Not Flintstone Jetson. That's a different episode, right? This is Flintstone, like in a stone, like a flint stone. So
like
Kabbalah,
a flintstone you would strike to create flame.
correct. There's two ways, there's two forms of fire. The coal and the flintstone. What's the difference? Well, there's a lot of differences. Number one, go grab a hot coal. Okay, sorry. Do not go grab a hot coal. Do not try this at home. That is very hot. Like a white hot coal or even a red hot coal. A flintstone, yeah, not a problem. You can hold it, you can grab it, it's not a problem. Now, they both produce fire, right? Well, how does it work with the coal? Well, you probably just have to hold, I don't know, piece of paper by the coal. It will catch on fire, and use that to light something else. I don't know. You can light a bonfire from a hot coal. From a flintstone, you can also light a bonfire, right? You strike it, produce a spark, you get some kindling going, you create a fire. I never joined the Boy Scouts, but if I did, I would probably have even a little bit more information about how to pull that off. But right, you strike the stone and you produce a spark, and that produces the fire. Now, when you have the fire, you have two bonfires, one created by the coal, one created by the flintstone. Is there any discernible difference in the actual fire that is produced between one and the other? The answer is yeah, correct. But I feel like I should probably repeat the question so it makes sense. The question is, could you identify the source of the fire when looking at the bonfire? The answer is no, you cannot. It looks identical. Right? It's the same thing, fire, bonfire A, bonfire B. It's not an episode of Is a Cake. These are both fire, right? Drop the reference there just in case anyone knows what I'm talking about, right? Both are fire. Fire A, fire B, it's the same fire. One came from a coal, one came from a flintstone. Do I care? Not really, except for the following fact. The very fact that the coal wears its fire on its sleeve. I know coals that have sleeves, but the very fact that the fire of the coal is right there on the surface to the point that it's hot and it's glowing, and if you touch it, you feel it. That means that it's also susceptible to becoming neutralized. If you pour cold water on that hot coal, enough cold water, what happens to the fire in the coal? It's done. To the point that you probably can't resuscitate it after that. Or you take a coal, you drop it into the lake, that coal is gone, you will never produce fire from that thing again. So its advantage is its disadvantage. The advantage is it's hot and you know it's hot. You can see that it's hot. It's wearing its heat on its sleeve. You cannot mistake in this for anything other than a hot coal. It's a hot coal. It says, hello, I'm a hot coal. You look at it, you see it's hot. You get close, you see that it's hot. It's on fire and you know it. But because of that, it's susceptible. Because it's wearing its emotions on its sleeve, it's susceptible to azets, to getting hit from the other side and to becoming neutralized. The flintstone, you look at it, I don't see any fire. There's fire in this. There's no fire in this. What kind of fire? By the way, Kabbalah says there's fire in the flintstone. And I always wonder, like, did they really mean that there's fire inside or the potential to create fire inside? And I've always assumed the latter, but you never know. You never know with these ancient Kabbalists what they actually meant. But the Kabbalists say that the flintstone contains fire, or at least the potential to create fire. But it doesn't wear it on its sleeve. You look at it, I don't see any fire. You touch it, I don't feel any heat. There's no glow, there's no warmth, you don't get burned. And so, on the one hand, you would say, what a lousy source of fire. You wouldn't even know, it's hidden. The fire is hidden. I prefer something that says, I'm fired, to saying, I don't know, maybe if you strike it at the right angle, at the right time, with the right force, maybe you could produce a spark. That seems like a weaker source of fire. And yet, precisely because it does not wear its fire on its sleeve, it is impervious to becoming broken. Take the flintstone, drop it in a lake, leave it there for 1,000 years, retrieve it, pull it out, wipe it dry, strike it, you will produce fire. Precisely because it's hidden, it's behind a firewall, precisely because it's not on the surface, that gives that fire invincibility. The Ahava mesuteres, the hidden love that we possess for God, by nature, by the very DNA of our soul, it's called mesuteres for two reasons. Number one, we're not always aware of it. Like the flintstone, you can look at it and not realize that there's a potential for fire inside. So sometimes we can think of ourselves or think of someone else like, I don't see it. I don't see it. That person or myself, someone who's a passionate Jew, I don't see it. I just don't see it. So that's on the one hand. The other hand, the fact that it's hidden means that it's always there. The fact that it's hidden means that it's not on its sleeve. It's not something that can be contended with or opposed. And therefore, it's always there, ready to go, ready to be extracted with the right force. Or break in case of emergency. Or actually, in case of emergency, break glass. Typically, this Ahava mesuteres, this hidden love, comes out under duress. The mystics talk about this extensively in the context of mesirat nefesh, which is the idea of self-sacrifice, which is more spoken very clearly. It's the experience that we've experienced as a people throughout our history of being pushed, of being threatened, of others trying to squeeze the Judaism out of us. And the response, oftentimes, I would say most times, is that the passion, this fire comes out. In other words, what brings out this hidden fire, this hidden love? Well, like the flintstone, being struck. Being struck, the force of opposition doesn't break it. On the contrary, it doesn't break the stone. It brings out the fire, brings out the spark inside the stone. Now, we've seen this, we saw this a year ago, October 7th, right? We saw what happened with October 7th, right? A threat, not only a threat, horrors done to our people, and how the soul came out, how suddenly there's unity, right? And there's passion and mitzvahs and soldiers wrapping tefillin and wearing tzitzis and the whole world, everyone's rallying around and donating, and it's amazing. Inevitably, what happens is that because it's the Ahava mesuteres, because it's the hidden love, inevitably it it recedes back to the hidden spaces. Not that it's not there within us, but that it's not always, we don't always wear it on our sleeve. But what I'm trying to suggest this morning is that that's actually, there's a negative in that. Because we're not always passionate, but the positive is that it's always accessible and it can never be broken. It's the unbreakable reality of the soul. But this idea that sometimes it takes a little bit of force, a little bit of counter force to bring out the inner love, it's a powerful concept that I think plays out in many different areas. So for example, relationships. Sometimes we don't appreciate a relationship until we've lost it, right? And this is true on many, many different levels, right? Where, we're in a relationship, we have a relationship, whether it's with spouse, a child, a parent, whatever it is. And obviously, this is not in any way to, the point of this analogy is simply to say this, that sometimes we appreciate something when we no longer have it. And this is something that, I think happens often with parents and children. Like it's always complicated between children and parents, right? Because no parents are perfect, no children are perfect. Sometimes, and that's what the power of Yizkor is where we remember the good things. And the not so good things, like, okay, we'll let bygones be bygones, but we appreciate the good things. And I think this is a truth in life, that sometimes it takes, things that are less than pleasant. Sometimes, not that it should take, but sometimes that's the reality, is that, the things that hit us hard are the things that bring out the depth of our love, of our connection. And again, it's true with Hashem as well. The key here is to not have to wait until we are struck from an external dynamic. The goal would be self-striking Flintstone, right? How do we strike ourselves? How do we motivate ourselves? How do we push ourselves to bring out the depth of our character? David, jump in.
I was going to say that isn't another aspect of this the hidden nature of the fire and the Flintstone, the idea that God put it there, but it's up to us to bring it out.
Yes, very good. That's another dimension. Good, thanks for highlighting that. The idea that what David is saying is accurate, which is that it's not just that it's hidden, we're not always aware of it. It's not just that it's unbreakable because it's hidden, but it's that becomes our avodah, that becomes our service or our mission, which is to bring it out, which I think ties into this last point that I was saying about not having to wait till something dramatic or drastic or, God forbid, not positive happens, so that we should feel connected. We should have that connection. We should self-induce it. That becomes our avodah. That becomes our work, our job to pull it out. It's almost like God says, I'm giving you the greatest treasure, but now you pull it out. You pull it out. I'm giving it to you. You have it. You have it. It's in your account. It's in your soul. Now your job is to pull it out. I did all the hard work, God says. I put it there. Now you have to pull it out. Not to minimize the work, but now pull it out and access it and realize it. Now, again, to live with this passionate love 24/7 would be very hard. I mean, just again, I'll give an analogy. To treasure and hug and hold your children, every time you encounter them, like you did the first moment you held them when they were born, it's a very high bar to say that you should feel. I remember when Nassim, I think I told the story recently. I remember when Nassim was born, my oldest, he's now 20, which is weird because I'm 24, but whatever, one of those things. So anyway, so we were living in Brooklyn in Grand Heights then, and he was born in Brooklyn Methodist Hospital, right? Nice Jewish hospital in Park Slope. And it was great. It was wonderful. He was born Shabbat morning at like 5:40 a.m. So, first of all, Shabbat morning birth, fantastic. At least for the dad. I can only speak for myself. No, in the context of like no phone calls, no distraction. You're just fully present with the funny story. So Leah wanted to let her family know in South Africa that we had a baby. So one of the nurses said, is there anyone we can let know? So she had before Shabbat, she had written down like a fax number. Remember back in the day they had fax machines? So, and this was already, I'm trying to figure out, 5:40 a.m. Saturday morning in May. No, it was still been Shabbat in South Africa. So anyway, no judgment. This is the story, how the story goes. So the hospital faxed the one sheet of the baby, like baby boy, you get the specs, size, weight with the footprint, right? The feet footprint, the prints of the feet. and they faxed it in. But they faxed it, I guess the direction they faxed it, it first came out feet first on the fax in Johannesburg. So they saw like the other details, but they were waiting like boy or girl. The last thing was at the top. It's a boy. And it just like I've heard, on the other side, on the receiving end, just amazing. But anyway, back to me. Let's make this about me for a second. So so what am I gonna do? Like, I don't have that much, like, I don't know. Like, what do you do? So I had a few hours. So I figured I'll go to shul. There's a Chabad shul in Park Slope. So and we had done some recon, like I knew where it was. It wasn't far. I was like a few blocks away from the hospital. So I walked in. And when you walk into a shul, to a synagogue for the first time, inevitably people say, "Oh, welcome. Are you visiting? What brings you here?" That sort of thing. So I remember I was beaming. I'm like, "Oh, what brings me here? I'm so glad you asked. Just had a baby. Like, we just had a baby, boy, whatever, this morning." And I remember, like, I got an aliyah and, did a mishaberach and all that stuff. And I just remember thinking, like there's no greater joy. Like, just thinking, like, oh, there's no greater joy. Like, can never be this happy. And, how do you maintain that? How do you keep that ecstasy of day one? I don't know that it's possible. Like, could you even live and function that way all the way through? It's like that heightened sense of like ecstasy, that ne'ilah sense of connection with God, or whatever whether it's ne'ilah, whatever your brand is, whether it's ne'ilah or maybe kol nidre, maybe simchat Torah, whatever that, like, can that be maintained? The real answer is maybe by tzaddik. It's really hard to maintain that as a human being. It's like, what would that look like? Like, could you go grocery shopping with that level of ecstasy? Like, would you even be able to function? The answer is probably yes. Dr. Max, you jump in.
So my question is are we even intended to function that way? I mean, I thought Hashem wanted something in the lower world, hence why we're here. And it would be, I mean, how could you focus on any of the things that are required to maintain the body, which is the home of the godly soul, while you're in this manifestation? So, I mean, was it ever really intended that you should do that continuously?
Right. Good. Exactly. It may not even be recommended or ideal or part of the plan to live with that level of ecstasy, which means that even as Kabbalah says, at the core of our being, at the core of the godly soul lies this Ahava mesuteres, this incredible love that can be accessed, etc., and pulled out, and the goal is that it inspire us, etc. But are we living with that in our sleep 24/7? Again, most of us, when I say most, I mean pretty much all of us, are not living there. And one could even argue, as Dr. Maxey just mentioned, that we're not even really meant to be living at that level 24/7. We're meant to have moments of that level of ecstasy, and then also have moments in which we're tackling real life and infusing that with, I'm not using this word in a negative way, but with the remnants of that, the residuals of that ecstasy, of that experience. In other words, is it really about being on fire to the point that we're burning up the place? Or is it that we're recalling the fire to go about our lives in a meaningful and purposeful way? In case of emergency, break the glass, right? When you need it, you have what to pull out. You have emergency fire. It's the opposite, right? In case of emergency means we want to put out the fire. Spiritually, in case of emergency, we want to ignite the fire. It's the opposite, right? Break the glass to access the fire, not to put out the fire, to access the fire. In case of emergency means when we find ourselves stuck in a spiritually dull space. We find ourselves spiritually sluggish. We find ourselves spiritually struggling. We find ourselves spiritually swinging and missing. We're like missing our targets, and it's becoming more consistent. When we find ourselves in that space, then yes, we're going to need to pull out the heavy. We need to pull out the big guns, and that means either self-striking. I don't actually mean that literally, but it means, right, striking our own flintstone, right, generating that spark from within. Or, I mean, and we shouldn't have to wait for this, when life kind of throws challenges our way, that can bring out the spark, but we should never, rely on that or wait for that or wish that. That seems like a very not ideal way to go about life. So that is the core idea of Ahava mesuteres. It's a gift that we have by virtue of the fact that we have a godly soul. We have this unextinguishable fire within that burns passionately for God, for purpose, for meaning, etc. But it's hidden in the sense that we're not always accessing it. It is accessible, but we're not always living by it and with it. We're not always living with it on our sleeve, as it were. At the same time, in order to access it requires a little bit of force, a little bit of effort, because it's not the norm. It's not the normative way of living. But all of this is the greatest gift. It's a gift that we have, that we can access, we can pull out, it can inspire us, and then it can go back to a safe place. I always liken this in my head, at least, maybe also I've explained this before, to if you're creating, let's say, I'm seeing an iPhone on the table, Apple puts their kernel, puts their core, the core information of the chips, it puts it behind layers of firewall where you can't access it, so that you can't brick your phone. The point is that they keep the core functionality safe. Yes, you can modify this, you can move an app around from one screen to the other, but we're not going to let you so deep into the system where you could actually devastate the system. And so in a similar way, there's almost like this firewall around this Ahava mesuteres. It's not accessible. You in a normative situation, you cannot access it to tamper with it, but you can pull it out in case of emergency to use. Now, should we have more moments of utilizing this deep reservoir of passion within? Sure. Are we going to ever live with it 24/7? I would say likely not. But the goal is to have more and more opportunities to pull this out. And all of this is connected with our text, which we're going to jump inside. Today, the goal is to finish the first chapter, which is going to be several pages. So we're going to do a lot actually inside, because it's been a few weeks since we went inside. And at the core of the tension of our text, which I'm going to connect it to right now, is this question of, there's a medrash that says that when God wished to create the world, his first thought was to utilize the energy of kavura, which is this harsh energy, as opposed to chesed, which is love, kind, gentle. Why would God, a good God, we believe that God is good, why would a good God, why would his first notion of creation be inspired or infused with the sense of harshness as opposed to gentleness? One of the answers we'll discover is that it takes sometimes a little harshness to break the glass and access the fire.
Rabbi, it takes harshness to strike. You have to strike that flint to bring the flame out. Exactly. In case of emergency, break glass, you may need a little force over there to access what's hidden deep within. To access the deepest reservoirs of our potential, sometimes it needs a little bit of tough love. Like any coach, right? That's ever, given a player a little bit of a harsh, a little tough love. It's all to bring out the best. It's all to bring out the best. If you're told consistently, you're great, you're perfect, you're wonderful as you are, then you're not striving for anything better, right? And by the way, I always go back to this because I don't know, he was the greatest when I was growing up. Michael Jordan, a guy who was always driven to become better. No matter that he was the best basketball player on earth, he still wanted to become better. Why? I don't think because anyone else was striking. I don't think anybody else was saying you're not good. I think he himself was striking his own flintstone. I think he himself was pushing himself like, I need to dig deeper. I need to become better. So there is a way to do that from within. The point is that the methodology or the energy of a bit of harshness is not always bad. Sometimes it's the best thing that ever happened to us. I mean, look, just think about it on a basic level.
Sometimes failure is the greatest educator in life. I'm looking around. I don't think anybody was there yesterday when I did Davening 101. I just want to share one point that I mentioned at Davening 101 yesterday. Speaking about Noach, and what a complicated guy. Because the more you read up about him, you're not sure if he's a hero or not a hero. What is this? Is he a role model? Is he the anti-role model? He saved the world, but was it too little, too late? Like, what's going on here? The Rebbe has an interesting twist on it, and he says, look, everyone agrees. The Rebbe actually reconciles. I think we may have learned this. Did we learn this? I think we learned this. That everyone agrees that in his generation, he was righteous. He was the best guy in his generation. Everyone agrees that if you cut and paste him and drop him in next to Avram, next to Abraham, he wouldn't be able to hold a candle to Abraham. But at the same time, that's not an indictment of Noach. Noach, his liability was he didn't care to save the world. He just cared to save himself and his family and the animals. He did what he was told to do. He didn't go out of his way to really care for the other beings. But is that an indictment of him? Why? How is he supposed to know? Abraham comes up, 10 generations later, and suddenly he's a hero. When God says, I'm going to destroy Sodom, no, wait, Moses. Generations after that, God says, I'm going to destroy the Jewish people after the sin of the Lord. No, wait, you can't do that. Where did they learn that from? Noach's mistake. Noach didn't step up, didn't defend. The world was destroyed. The message is, when things get hot, you have to step in. Don't. They had the luxury of Noach's mistake. So is Noach to blame? Or was he just the first guy? He was the first guy. How did he know what was going to happen? You never know until you know. How do you know what the mistake leads to unless you made the mistake? And then I'm not going to do it again. If you never touched fire and never got burned, how would you ever know that it's hot? Like, how do you know that? How do you know what happens without touching it once? Metaphorical. Are you with me on this? Why am I saying this? Truth is, I don't remember. But I'm saying this likely because even though God is a loving God, sometimes it takes a little bit of friction. Whether it's external pressure, internal motivation, or some mistakes and some harshness. Learning things the hard way to really elevate us to the greatest potential. All right, with that in mind, let's jump into our text, the much awaited Kabbalah Café booklet text. Scott, please take a pass. Norm, please take and pass as well. We'll probably have extra copies, just keep it down there, if you will. All right, I'm going to pull this up on the screen as well. What is our text called? Yisrael.
Rabbi, what page is this in the book?
1 second. I'm not sure yet, but I will get there. I will let you know in a second. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, page 30. Page 30. All right. This is going to be great.
And I'm sorry, Rabbi, what's the book so I can get it?
Oh, sure. The book is the
Power of Return.
Power of Return. Yeah.
Got it.
The Power of Return. It's a Kihat book. And
awesome. Thank you.
It's from the series of discourses 56, 59. Yeah. If you need a link, let me know. I don't know if they're I would hope that they're in print. If not, you can
I was able to get mine on Amazon.
Oh, you did find one? Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Good. All right. So page 30. And by the way, the goal is to go from page 30 all the way to page 38. Ambitious, you say? Correct. Ambitious. Today, we're going to finish chapter 1. That's the plan. All right, I'm going to share my screen so we can all follow along together. And here we go. We're up to the section where it says Gevura-based divine service. And again, we're addressing in our text the simple question of why is it that the Medrash says that when God created the world, he thought to utilize the attribute of Gevura. Gevura means harshness, severity. And then he only later mixed within it. He realized that wasn't going to work. So he mixed with it some chesed and some rachmanas, some mercy and some kindness. Why? We explained up until now, not today, but I mean in previous sessions, we explained that the sense of utilizing Gevura in creating the world is in order to keep everyone in check. Because if there's no justice, if there's no consequence, there are no consequences, then just crime will run rampant. And so you kind of need a little Gevura to keep people, the fear of punishment to keep people in check. But he's going to go way beyond that today to some of the themes that we've been speaking about the last few weeks. Gevura-based divine service. Now, aside from the fact that through Gevura, one is protected from sin. In other words, when you know that there are consequences, guardrails, so you kind of stay away, you stay in the lane, you don't veer off. Furthermore, and this is the new idea, furthermore, in terms of one's spiritual service, one is able to attain through Gevura a level of spiritual service that far surpasses the level of spiritual service attainable through the attribute of kindness and mercy. If I were to say that in my own words, it's by applying pressure to oneself, whether it's to oneself or from outside. It's through pressure that we rise, that we mature, that we ascend in our spiritual service, as opposed to when everything is calm and kind and merciful. It's kind of like, the expression, necessity is the mother of invention. No one ever said the Caribbean is the mother of invention. And the reason is because when you're on the beach in the Caribbean, probably everything's fine, just the way it is. You're not looking to fix something. It's all good. It's actually all good, right? When you've got some pressure, you got a problem you can't solve, suddenly new ideas come about. I'm not saying that no innovations ever came from a place of relaxation, but typically a little bit of pressure. I was listening to a podcast and it was about Nintendo. Oh, Nintendo. So glad we had this conversation. Because what I like listening to certain podcasts, but I also like when I'm able to bridge it with Torah. So now here we go. So Nintendo apparently has not laid off anyone in the last few decades. Unlike other major corporations that constantly are churning through, I know locally at Coca-Cola, for example, because I teach there like once a month or so. It's like they're always doing they're always going through people. So unlike places unlike other corporations, Nintendo in Japan, they keep people. Why? They have a philosophy that people work well and are innovative when they're not afraid of losing their job. This is the opposite approach. This is the chesed will create innovation and whatever. But certainly our mimer seems to indicate that it's through Gevura that we get pushed to elevate higher. All right, back inside. On the words, the Levite himself shall perform, which, by the way, is a fragment of a verse that seems very innocuous at first. But just so you know, the Hebrew is va'avad halevi hu. The Levite himself shall perform. And this is a verse that refers to the service of the Levites. Oh, look at footnote 46. Do we have it here somewhere on the page?
Yeah, it's from page 31.
Yes.
All right, there we go. Footnote 46, Numbers 18. The verse reads, the Levite himself shall perform the service in the tent of meeting, and they, the Levites, shall bear the iniquity of those Israelites who trespass on the tent of meeting, an eternal decree for your generations. This verse speaks of the Levites' exclusive service in the tabernacle and their responsibility in ensuring that no Israelites trespass on the tabernacle, as Rashi comments on the verse. So basically, the Torah says that the Levites are the ones that are running the show, and they should also make sure that no non-Levite, i.e. Kohen or Levi, comes and approaches those holy places of the temple or the Mishkan that they were not permitted to enter. Put signs like, beware, of God.
Mishkan police.
Huh?
Mishkan
The
police.
Mishkan police. Mishkan. Okay, so back to page 30. So this is the Zohar. We're about to study a piece of Zohar on that fragment of the verse. The Levite va'avad alevihu, the Levite himself shall perform. Here's what the Zohar comments. Himself who? By the way, in Hebrew, the verse doesn't really, it seems like there's an extra word. It could have just said va'avad alevi, and the Levite shall serve. Va'avad alevi who? The Levite himself shall perform. I mean, I guess it's trying to make it exclusive, but it's a little bit of a weird turn of phrase. So the Zohar says, himself, who? The Atika. Himself alludes to Atik. Now, Atik is the deepest level of Keter, which is one of the deepest levels within the Sphira, within the divine energies. Himself, who alludes to Atik, meaning almost like the essence of God, where judgment not established in the world, in other words, without Gevura, people would not know of a higher belief, page 32. People would not know of a higher belief. People would not toil in Torah. And who in this world serves the Holy King with a consummate service? The Levites. That's the piece of Zohar. Now, look, Zohar was written a few thousand years ago, and it's very difficult to understand if you just casually read it in English or translation. But what the Zohar is really saying is, Va'avad alevi hu. Levi, and he's about to say this inside, but I'll just share it first outside. Levi, the Levites, refer to the energy of Gevura. Kohen is Chesed. Kohen ish Chesed. Aaron HaKohen, right? He was an Ohev Shalom, a Rodev Shalom, right? A Kohen is defined by Chesed, by peace. That's why the Kohen blesses the congregation. Be Ahava, with love. The Levite, the Levi, is marked by Gevura. That's the energy difference between a Kohen and a Levi. Kohen is Chesed, a Levi is Gevura. Says the Torah, Va'avad HaLevi, who? That it's specific through the avodah, the service of the Levi, that you reach the level of who? Who in Hebrew means he. It's like the essence of God. Va'avad HaLevi, who? It's through the avodah, through the service of the Levi Gvura, that you reach the highest level within the divine. You reach the who, you reach the highest level. And the Zohar says, if not for Gevura, if not for a little bit of pressure, no one would believe, no one would have a higher belief, no one would toil in Torah. That's what the Zohar says. Without a little bit of pressure, without a little Gevura, then we would all just be, I don't know, browsing TikTok. 32-second paragraph. It is specifically through the Levites who correspond. I mean, we do that anyway. It is specifically through the Levites, even with Gevura. Can you imagine without? It is specifically through the Levites who correspond to the left vector Gevura, the attribute of judgment, right? Justice, judgment, Gevura, a little bit of pressure, that people can achieve true divine service, ultimately eliciting through their service a revelation of Atik, who da Atika, who is Atik. Atik, the highest level, which is alluded to by the word himself, the word who in Hebrew. By contrast, were there to just be kindness, to be just kindness and mercy without judgment, if everything was, as they say in French, laissez-faire, did I say that right? Can't get these things right. Say it again, laissez-faire. What does that mean? Did I use it in the right context? Live and let live, kind of like it's all good. Yeah, imagine that. Laissez-faire? Laissez-faire. All right. Imagine if that's the way it was, right? Then were there to just be kindness and mercy without judgment, people could never reach this lofty level of service that it is achieved through the attribute of judgment. Moreover, they couldn't, so they would never within themselves push themselves higher and deeper. Moreover, on a spiritual level, they cannot elicit a spiritual light as lofty as that which is elicited by the attribute of judgment. So people wouldn't maximize their potential, and therefore they wouldn't be pulling from the deepest level of their service wouldn't be hitting the highest level of divine service of divine light to pull that down back into the world. Because we know when it comes to avodah, to our service, it's always midah keneged midah. It's always our effort. The way we show up, the energy that we put out there spiritually is the energy that comes back to us. So if we put out a deep energy, we elicit a deep energy back to us. If we put out lazy energy, we get lazy energy from above. right? Not lazy like laissez-faire, but like, right, but like a non-passionate energy. So the more passionate we are, and so what bears passion? What gives birth to passion? A little bit of pressure. That's what he's saying. A little bit of gvura. Chesed, it's all good. It's all good. Then what am I pushing myself? If I'm told that I'm good as I am, great. Am I striving higher? Am I pushing myself? Why would I toil in Torah if I believe that I know it all? Why would I toil, not study, toil? Amal, Yagia, what's the Hebrew word over here? The Hebrew word, that's actually Aramaic. Hishtadlut. Why would I work hard? Why would I hustle in Limud Torah and studying Torah if I'm good the way I am? I only hustle if I feel like I'm not there yet. That's gvura. I'm not there yet. I haven't arrived. I don't need someone else to tell me that. I can tell myself that. I don't need someone else to hit my Flintstone. I can strike my own Flintstone. Self-striking matches is not a thing, but it should be a thing, right? Self-striking flames. This is self-induced pressure to climb higher, to reach higher, which then triggers a higher spiritual light. And so he summarizes for us, thank God. Look at this, 3 advantages of Gevurah. Because we asked, and I know I've said this question now 2 or 3 times today, why does a good God start with Gevurah? And we have now 3 answers. Thus we find an advantage and superiority in the attribute of judgment, Gevurah, over the attribute of kindness and mercy, Chesed Rachamim, in three respects. Number 1, firstly, had the world been established through just the attribute of kindness and mercy, sin would be widespread, anarchy, for people would not be involved in Torah study and the performance of mitzvot, turning away from evil and doing good. If there was no fear of retribution or punishment or consequence, if there was no sound when you pulled off the road, if there was no rumble strips, you would never know to recalibrate. Thus, the Zohar cited above states, were judgment not established, people would not toil in Torah. However, because of their fear of punishment, which such punishment stems from the attribute of judgment, obviously, you can't punish until you judge, people are careful to observe mitzvot in both turning away from evil and doing good. That's number 1. That's the first benefit, page 34. Secondly, also with regards to the service itself, spiritual service performed through the attribute of judgment, gevurah, possesses an advantage and superiority over the service performed through the attribute of kindness and mercy. As the Zohar cited above states, that the consummate service, the greatest level of avodah, of serving God, found in this world is accomplished by the Levites who are of the left vector. And as I've explained, and hopefully today's kind of introduction helps us understand this a little bit better, it's the pressure that unlocks the greatest depth of our being, both physically and spiritually. It's the pressure. It's the breaking of the glass. It's the striking of the flintstone that brings out the spark inside. You can't pull out the spark if it's just, calm and gentle. Gentle touches don't bring out the fire from the flintstone. It requires a little bit of gevurah, a little bit of harshness. Self-induced, but harshness. Thirdly, the third advantage of gevurah is it elicits an extremely lofty spiritual light, the level of atik. It's the highest level, the highest of the divine structure of the sphere. Hence the statement, were judgment not established in the worlds, people would not know of a higher belief, for this awareness can only emanate through service rooted in the left vector. So the point is, and the left vector is a euphemism for gevurah, chesed is on the right, gevurah is on the left. It's through this left power that actually we can achieve the greatest and deepest dimensions of spiritual service. So I'm going to summarize the summary. 3 points. Number 1, without a little gevurah, without a little fear of consequence, we would just be completely off the rails. Number 2, without a little bit of gevurah, we wouldn't push ourselves to keep on climbing higher, to keep on growing. And the third point, without gevurah, without the service based on gevurah, we would never reach the highest spiritual light that we can attain through gevurah. Those are the 3 points. Now, he's kind of stated it. He hasn't really explained it. He explained a little bit. I explained a lot outside. But here he goes now. He spends the next few pages breaking this down a little bit further. And again, our goal is to finish the chapter to page 38. It's pretty easy reading, but here we go. The concept is as follows. It is written, and now he's quoting a verse from Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. Just so you know what we're talking about, this is a hug, right? A hug where you put your left hand, right, behind the person's head. Norm, should we demonstrate? I'm kidding, right? The left hand is right under the head, and the right arm embraces, right? It's a hug. Yes? Okay, good. I.e., so but Kabbalah has a different understanding, obviously. It's not just like a hug. This is a whole construct, spiritual construct. And just again, just to be very clear, left is always Gevura and right is always Chesed. So left arm under my head and right arm embracing me. Well, right arm embracing makes sense. Chesed, love, is embracing. But what's the left hand under my head? Okay, well, here we go. I.e., through the left arm that rebuffs, typically the left is Yemin Mikarevet, small doche. So much to explain. All right. The Talmud says, La'olam Yehei Yemin Mikarevet, small doche. Whenever you need to rebuke, you should always rebuke with your left hand, which for most people is the weaker hand, but your right hand should always bring people close. Not like Rabbi so-and-so who pushed away with both hands, and we ended up with Yeshu. That's what the Talmud says. Talmud says a story. Talmud says a story about a rabbi who was evicted had to run away from Israel because things were getting a little hot. He was a wanted man because of his Torah teachings. And so he took his students and they went to Alexandria, they went to Egypt. And then they found out it was fine, so they came back up, they were going back home. And on the way, they stopped at an inn. And at the inn, so there was the innkeeper and the innkeeper's wife, and then the rabbi said to one of the students, he said, the hospitality, he was saying something about the hospitality is not so good, but the student thought he was talking about the wife of the innkeeper. Said, yeah, she's not so pretty because of X, Y, or Z. He says, we're speaking about the physical looks of the innkeeper's wife. You're out of my issue. You're out of my student group. And so he asked for forgiveness a few times. And the third time that he asked for forgiveness, the teacher was going to re-accept him. But he was in the middle of Shema, so he put up his hand to say, wait. But the student thought he was saying no. And so the student went and he practiced witchcraft and stuff, the sorcery that he got from Egypt. And he started his own movement. And it says that that's Yeshu. Who's Yeshu? I don't know who Yeshu is, but it might be the source of another religion, right? That cropped up at that time, or it might not be. There's a dispute in the Talmud, in the commentaries, whether that's at all related to the origins of Christianity or not, but that's the story that's told. The Talmud says it's as a cautionary tale, don't be like that rabbi who pushed away with both hands, right? You want to make a point, but not so drastic. Tough love is still love, still tough, but love. Don't be the one to say no, not to be so strict where you drive people out, right? I get this question so many times from parents that are wondering about their kid, whatever it is. And it's like, to make a point that we don't approve of X, Y, or Z, should we push them out? I always say the answer is no, do not do that. The worst thing you could do. You can influence if they're on the inside and you're on the inside, you can have an influence. If you kick them out, as it were, metaphorically or even literally, then what kind of influence are you gonna have? It's a terrible idea. Anyway, it should always be pushing away with the weaker hand, but pulling close with the stronger hand. That's what the Talmud says.
It's kind of irrelevant, I'm going to say, but I delve into the New Age. The Gevurah and the Chesed seems to be on the wrong side, according to the spiritual, because the left is the feminine and the right is the masculine. And if you look at the Kabbalah with the brain, this is the creative, this is the rational.
Right.
So you would assume this would be the Chesed, this would be.
So Chesed is always expansive. Like Chachma, which is the creative, the right brain, which is the creative side. So it's the flow. So Chesed is also flowing. Gevurah is a little bit more withdrawn. Gevurah is a little bit more, the energy is coming in, a little bit more drawn in. That's where Gevurah is.
So that's why
on the left side.
The one on, you'd think that'd be the one on the right and the right left. Like that is, this just according.
Yeah. See,
It's the way it is. Yeah.
yeah, it's some differences. but
Yeah. Of course.
That's what makes things interesting. It's all the same.
But yeah, the left is generally feminine, and the chesed is more. I mean,
Right.
the Gevurah is a
Right.
masculine.
No, it
quality.
does say right. It does say chachma is more
Feminine. Yeah. It's differences. Actually.
interesting. Yeah. More to explore as to where that masculine feminine piece comes in. But the point is like this, that the Talmud says that Yamin Mikarevet, the right should draw close, and the left should be the one to push away. Looking back at our text, he breaks us down Kabbalistically. Second paragraph from bottom of page, the last paragraph in 34. This is because through the left arm that rebuffs, his heart breaks within him. In other words, through a little bit of small daicha, through a little bit of left arm harshness to yourself, not to someone else. He's talking about all internally. He breaks his own heart, meaning open up a little bit, revealing the innermost core of his soul. The goal of this heartbreak, as it were, is not to hurt, but to open up, to become less stuck, to become more vulnerable, more open. As the president of the Heavenly Academy declared, and this is what we studied last week, a wooden beam that does not catch fire should be splintered. A body into which the light of the soul does not penetrate should be crushed. It is specifically through this crushing that the light of the soul penetrates the body. It's that internal work of opening up that comes through Gvura. I'm not 100% perfect the way I am. I have more work to do. I'm not perfection personified. I have more things that I need to accomplish and take care of. That's what opens me up to allow the soul's light, the fire, to really catch on. Let's continue. 36. Just as the shell, klipa, just as a shell must be broken to reveal the fruit of a nut, the same is true within a human being. The fruit is the hidden love. Oh, today's topic. The hidden love, Ahava mesuteres, the hidden love of God that lies within the soul. That's what the fruit, that's the core. And the body and animal soul are the shells that cover and conceal this love. So what do you need to do? How do you access? I told you already from the subject of this week's email. Break in case of emergency, or in case of emergency, break. If you find yourself not accessing that Ahava mesuteres, that hidden love of God that's within, you got to break the shell. You got to crack it open. You got to break the glass. You got to open up a little bit. Therefore, it is written, second paragraph 36, therefore it is written, I went down to the nut grove. Can't make this up. That's a verse. Where is this verse from? 64, Song of Songs, once again. I went down to the nut grove, suggesting that after its descent into a body and animal soul, the godly soul is comparable to a nut that is encased and concealed in a hard shell. I went down to the nut grove is the journey of the soul below. I went down into the nut grove. I became a nut, says the soul. I used to be visibly on fire. In heaven, the soul's on fire. And now, where's my fire? Inside. Inside what? A shell. Can't see it. It's like the fire inside the Flintstone. You can't see it until you strike it, until you hit it. A nut, you got to crack open to get to the nut inside. You got to crack the shell to get to the nut. And cracking, just so you know, cracking nuts. You ever try to crack? What's the hardest nut that there is to crack? What's a hard nut?
Walnut.
Walnut. Yeah, it takes a little bit of effort. It takes some pressure. You think that's chesed or gvura? Let's be realistic. Chesed? It's not chesed. Gvura. Gvura means strength. Anyway, gvura literally means strength. You got to use a little force. You're going to break some things. You're going to break things. You know what they say? Like, tech companies now move fast and break things. It's like the motto, right? Move fast and break things. Like, we're going to put out a product. It's not going to work right away, but we know it's not going to work, but we're doing it anyway. Like AI, it's going to help. It's going to hallucinate. We're doing it anyway. Like, it doesn't matter because we got to iterate. We got to advance. If we wait till it's perfect, it's never going to come out. It's like, that has nothing to do with this, but I'm just reminding me of that. But move fast and break things. Sometimes you got to break things. You got to break yourself open. A little bit of gvura, a little bit of self-induced. You got to squeeze. You got to crack open the shell. Let's continue. So typically the soul, the Ahava mesuteres, the hidden love, is inside encased and concealed in a hard shell. Not only encased, but concealed. Not only is it covered, sometimes you don't even remember that it's in there. It's like, do I even have that love inside me? Do I even have that fire? I'm not even sure. I haven't felt it in a while. I don't even know if it's still lit. Is the pilot light out? Gonna call Atlanta Gas Company and come out to check on the pilot. But through the idea of you diminish man until he is crushed, right through that idea. And the verse of that is Pashev Enosh Ad Daka, which is a verse from Psalms. Through you diminish man until he is crushed, which is not God diminishing us, could also be, but us diminishing us breaking ourselves open through a contrite and broken heart, through breaking the shell, essentially. Let's continue inside. 3 lines from the bottom of 36. The fruit in the innermost core of man is revealed, which is the aspect of ru'ut of the liba, which means a yearning and a love and a desire of the heart, where the heart is visibly yearning, as it were, visibly yearning for God. As the Midrash Rabbah Tetzaveh states on 38, the verse, a leafy olive tree, beautiful with shapely fruits. Now we're compared to nuts and we're compared to olives, right? 2 verses, one about the nut and one about the olive. The verse now that we're dealing with is the one that says a leafy olive tree, beautiful with shapely fruit. That's us. And where's that verse? Jeremiah. And says the Midrash, why is Israel compared to an olive? Just as an olive yields oil when crushed, the same is true of Israel. How do we access the neshamas, the light of the neshama, the light of the soul inside, the mesuteres, the fire that burns within? How? You got to squeeze a little bit. You got to squeeze a little bit. This is the ultimate intent of the left arm that rebuffs. In other words, what is the goal of smoldocha? Why would you ever engage in gvura? Why would you ever engage in harshness? Not to push away, not to criticize yourself. The only purpose is to bring out the best. In itself, he says, the gvura is not a true end, God forbid. He says, God forbid, chas v'shalom. God forbid to think that the avodah of gvura is for the sake of gvura itself. Rather, no. Its purpose is to enable a person to attain the aspect of beautiful and with shapely fruit, the revelation of the soul's hidden love of God, and the aspect of rooted liba. The only reason to employ gvura is for a positive and beautiful end, to bring out the love, to bring out the fire inside. It's called Ahava mesuteres, hidden love, which is ironic because you're using gvura to bring out love.
So how do you do that?
It's through this introspection. It's through honest introspection. Where am I? Am I achieving am I achieving my goals? Am I optimizing my potential? Am I where I need to be in my spiritual relationships? Am I studying and praying and doing enough mitzvahs not enough, as many as I could be doing? Have I been attentive as I've needed to be to my spiritual calling, potential, purpose? And through that, inevitably, the conclusion will be no, because no one's a tzaddik. And through that, there's a desire for more, and that itself generates the passion.
So being hard on yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Exactly. Said very well. Being hard on yourself is literally gvura. What he's saying is, don't be hard on yourself for the sake of being hard on yourself. That's cruel. You have to be kind. Only if it's for the purpose of revealing the love inside and bringing out a positive thing. Never for an ugly purpose. Never because you're feeling down and gloomy. Never in a negative way. Only for a positive purpose. The only reason of smoldocha, of rebuffing yourself, of the harshness, is only to bring out the positive inside.
And therefore, this shouldn't be done in like a meditative state. This should be physical. This should be literally like.
It should be literal. It should be literal. It could be also meditated, but it should be done. I brought a text last week from Tanya where he says, find a time when you will feel the most conducive to this type of introspective work, and then do it then. Don't do it when it comes to you. Like when you're feeling down. That's the wrong. Then it's just going to take you down. It's going to just make you feel bad about yourself. And that's the goal is not to feel bad. The goal is to make yourself open so that the light comes pouring out. That's the goal. The goal is your goal is not to crush the nut. Imagine if you take a nut with a hard shell on it and you pulverize it. You don't have a nut. Now you're not eating anything. The goal is to crack it open to access the fruit inside. That's the goal.
But can we ever be enough?
No, that's the point.
So we can never be enough.
We can always grow. You say we can never be enough. I say, can Michael Jordan ever be the best basketball as good as he can? No, but that didn't crush him. That motivated him. That's the point. How do we use this as motivation, not as crushing, not as demeaning, but motivation? And by the way, sometimes it's a very thin line. And sometimes you hear athletes complaining about coaches recently. Was it Tua? Or was it another quarterback who said that his former coach, I think Tua, for the quarterback for Miami Dolphins, said that his previous coach berated him, told him he doesn't belong on the field, and it hurt him. And the coach said, "I'm sorry. I thought it was going to motivate him. Sometimes you crush a little too hard and you break the nut." I'm not saying he's broken, but I'm saying sometimes you go a litthis is a very, I'm going to say dangerous. It's a very tricky and potentially dangerous game over here. Experience, but it's a necessary one. So who says life is easy? You got to walk that fine balance. Back inside last paragraph, and then we close it. The crushing. Look at this. The crushing does not necessarily need to come from on high. This is something I've emphasized a few times today. Don't wait, God forbid. Don't wait, God forbid, for life to crush you, for bad things to happen, God forbid. It suffices that a person, and we have to put this in quotes, demeans and humbles himself, not demeans in a negative way, but that breaks himself open. Regarding this, the sages remarked, only with a sense of earnestness may one begin to pray, referring to the quality of surrender and humility. Before we daven, we should be going through this process, this introspection. It is precisely in this way that a person will reach a more transcendent, sublime level through his prayer, by first being open and vulnerable and realizing the limitations that they have, etc. That's what really breaks us open. All right, so in summation, today I started off with a little bit of a preamble about the Ahava mesuteres, the hidden love. We described what it is. It's this passionate yearning and fire and connection, wishing to connect with God. But it's mesuteres, it's hidden. It's hidden. It's typically not, we don't wear it on our sleeves. How do we access it? It's like the Flintstone. It's got to be struck. It usually requires a little bit of force, a little bit of effort. In case of emergency, break the glass. When someone's pushed, a 10-7 happens, when when tragedy strikes, that brings it out automatically. The question is, how do we, as we just said in the last paragraph, how do we not need tragedy, God forbid, to appreciate the light that we have inside? And that's the process of that opening up self. So this week, the exercise is, as he ended off the paragraph, one time this week, I'll let you choose which day and which tefillah, one time this week, before you begin to pray. And it doesn't matter how long you pray. You can pray for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour. Before you pray, one time this week, try to go through this internal meditation thought process, this internal thought process of recognizing where we're holding, recognizing where you are not only achieving, but where you're maybe falling short of potential, and have that open you up to become a little bit more raw and vulnerable, so that you pray with a little bit more intentionality and intensity and allow the light to flow out. The goal is not to crack ourselves open for the sake of breaking ourselves, but for the sake of accessing that hidden light. Thank you very much for joining me today for Kabbalah Café. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we begin the next chapter of this same text. Now, before you go, 2 quick announcements. Number 1, next Sunday, a week from today, an evening with Israel's wounded warriors. We have a delegation coming from Israel with the organization El Ami El Atzmi. This organization is dedicated to providing opportunities for soldiers, IDF soldiers, to continue protecting and serving Israel after they're no longer physically able to do that through their service in the army, by education, speaking opportunities, and advocacy. So they're coming to Atlanta. They'll be here, right here in the shul. Next Sunday, 7 p.m., we have a sushi and wine reception. 7:30 p.m., the program begins. We'll have multiple soldiers telling their story, videos of their service, etc. It's going to be a very powerful event as we mark, now with the second year since October 7th, a very beautiful and powerful event. Free and open to the community. We're looking for sponsors as well. So if you can help out, be in touch, please. Next Sunday, September 10th, 7 p.m., it starts. Then, final announcement, this week we are launching our new course, Nurturing Relationships. It's going to be an amazing course, 6 weeks, in how to deepen and elevate all of our relationships, whether it's at home, at work, or otherwise. This is the textbook that you will receive, textbook of many insights. I was going to say many pages. I don't know how many pages it is, because we're doing This is what we call an unboxing, right? This was just an unboxing, and you will receive one of these beautiful textbooks, full color, 300 pages, filled with Jewish insights, Jewish wisdom, Hasidic insights, and mystical teachings, practical teachings about relationships. Jewish wisdom for building deeper, richer connection in all your relationships starting this Wednesday. This is the book. Just got them yesterday. Just literally took off the saran wrap or whatever that is on one of these books. You will get soft touch. Feel that.
Rabbi, will it be
Soft touch
available?
right there.
Will it be available on Zoom for both the noon and the evening?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So this is, so I'm teaching it twice on Wednesday, 12 noon, 7:30 p.m., both in person and on Zoom. If you've signed up and you're out of town or whatever it is, you will be receiving a book in the mail. If you're here, I have books for you here. So here is the book. The course is amazing. Course, it's amazing. It's a JLI course. Can't go wrong with those. Join us Wednesday for that. All right.
Thank you.
Our favorite space. All right. Good to see.
Good to see you.
It's a little bit, I'll tell you why it's a little complicated. Because midweek, because of preschool, so they use it for the preschool. So they have to turn it over at night. The after school, they would have to turn it over and then quickly before the next morning. Here, it's the weekend. It's already a little bit upheaval. By the way, the good news is that hopefully in not too much longer, there's going to be a big renovation going on. Yes. Yeah. Social hall.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes. Hey.
Hey, I was gonna, if I can, real quick, I'll tell you a story real quick about coaching.
Yes.
I coached hockey for many years, won many national championships, and one of the things when you were talking about the coaches is that when players would come back after making mistakes, what we would do is obviously get on the player.
Well, one second. Give me your email address so I can add you to the list if there's a way to do that. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah. So when the players would come back to the bench after making a major mistake, is we definitely get on them for making a mistake. But by the end of the conversation, we always said, but hey, earlier in the game, you made an amazing pass or you blocked a shot, or we always build them up after breaking them down. So exactly what you were talking about. And that's how we won a bunch of championships. So thanks. Thank you for
Frank,
class.
how do we get my Penguins? I know you're a Philly guy, but how do we get my Penguins out of 5 and 7? Can we make them better or that's it?
That's it. You guys are done. You've had a nice long run. Knock it off.
Who was my guy? How was Lindros? Remember that guy? Eric Lindros?
Yeah. Him and his brother both have concussion issues and had to stop playing the game.
88. I remember that guy. By the way, really. Hi, Tova. Good to see you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi, for class.
Pleasure. Good to see you, Dr. Maxey, David, Renata, Lisa. We'll see you guys. Have a great week and hopefully see you at the class soon. Take care, guys.
Shavua Tov.